Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Commander video. This time I want to talk about my picks for the 20 best Commander cards to come from the Innistrad sets. This is all in preparation for the new Innistrad set, Midnight Hunt, and the other new Innistrad set following that shortly. I wanted to go through and do something fun just to get everybody excited for that. I wanted to pick out the 20 best Commander cards from the entire plane of Innistrad. So this is going to cover the original Innistrad, Dark Ascension, Avacyn Restored, Shadows Over Innistrad, and Eldritch Moon. 5 sets and over 1,000 cards to choose from. I did my best here to go through and pick out the 20 cards that I think best represent the strength from all of these sets combined. But before I get into the video, first I would like to remind you that most of you who are watching are not actually subscribed to the channel. So I would really appreciate it if you took a second to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you so much, it means a lot. The 20th card here, Sigarda's Aid from Eldritch Moon. Definitely an underrated card if you're considering any sort of aura or equipment strategy. However, I will say it does add a bit of strength to the equipment strategy because you get to bypass the equip costs, which does give you a bit more of a benefit there if you are playing an equipment strategy versus just an aura strategy. And if you're playing both, it's still something you would want to look into. Only a 1-mana white enchantment that sits out there on the field. Great value. Number 19 is Deadeye Navigator, one of the most hated cards in Commander for the longest time, although I think it's eased up quite a bit in the past few years. There are a ton of combo cards, a ton of ways to combo in competitive EDH that just make the Deadeye Navigator combos seem a little bit inefficient now by today's standards. However, this is still a great card if you're able to soul bond it with any good ETB creature. You have a way to repeatedly abuse it. Number 18, we have Tireless Tracker. While I'll admit clues are not my favorite way of drawing cards, if you're able to get a ton of them pretty easily through some kind of landfall strategy like with Tireless Tracker, it makes drawing cards even easier if you can get more of them. And hey, the Tireless Tracker itself will get a +1/+1 counter each time you sack a clue. Very good value card if you are looking to play landfall strategies. Number 17 is Eerie Interlude. I think this is easily one of the most underrated cards in the whole set and should be considered one of the strongest ones because of the ability to instant speed, protect your board, have all your creatures come back at the beginning of the next end step, or if you're like me, use something like an Archaeomancer to easily bring it back, recast it, and protect your board and get a ton of ETBs in the process. Number 16 is Liliana of the Vale. One of the most well-known planeswalkers in the entire game, Liliana of the Vale is without a doubt the strongest one from the Innistrad sets. And this wasn't always the case, but now that we have a ton of discard support, a lot of benefit off of forcing our opponents to discard, Liliana of the Vale is suddenly a lot more viable. It's not just an expensive planeswalker for you to flex your muscles with. And if you can get to that ult, most certainly a win con. And then number 15, we have Eldritch Evolution. Another card, just like with Eerie Interlude, this is an incredibly underrated card because it offers you what is strong about Birthing Pod on a 3-mana sorcery with more flexibility in what you're able to search up if you sacrifice a creature. Because it's X+2, it means you have a lot more to choose from, and it's also X or less, so you're not restricted to just searching up a creature card with that cost. So this is definitely a combo enabler, it's a competitive card, and this is what you want ultimately, a card with good power and flexibility. And number 14 is Sagarda, Host of Herons. One of a few angels you were probably expecting to see here on the list. Sigarda might just be the weakest, but that doesn't mean you're not going to get some decent protection out of the deal. Flying hexproof spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. This is such an underrated static ability because there are a ton of ways in black to force opponents to sacrifice. There are a lot of Grave Pact cards, a lot of things like Playcrafter. All it really takes is something like that and suddenly you lose your board presence. Sigarda says, not in my house. Number 13 is Michaeus the Unhallowed. Without a doubt in here because of the combo potential with cards like Triskelion and Walking Ballista. However, Michaeus is still valuable in other ways. Giving Undying to your non-human creatures is something you should definitely consider for any kind of zombie deck, any kind of deck where you would benefit off of +1/+1 counters and the Undying mechanic in general. And then number 12, we have Cathers Crusade. Just a ridiculous enchantment that I don't think people really appreciate how strong it is, but whenever you have a creature enter, it doesn't matter if it's non-token or token, all of your creatures, all of them, get +1/+1 counters. So if you have any way of blanking creatures, you will trigger this. If you have any way of getting a ton of token creatures, this will trigger it, and it'll trigger for each individual creature entering. So feel free to use something like increasing devotion to get yourself an insane number of +1/+1 counters. Number 11 is Gisela Blade of Gold Knight, another powerful angel, another one from Avacyn Restored. This set was just stacked. If a source would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double the damage. However, if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half that damage rounded up. So it's basically the perfect combat card, which in red and white, you're looking for something like this. You want to deal damage quickly, and you want to make it harder for your opponents to hurt you in the process. Moving to the halfway point here, we have number 10, Emricole the Promised End. Fun thing about Eldritch Moon was that it was the obvious reintroduction to the most powerful of the Eldrazi, Emricole. Emricole is a lot more tame this time around, however, still has a lot of power to offer you if you are looking to build some kind of Eldrazi tribal deck, any kind of colorless deck. That cast trigger, basically being a poor man's Mindslaver, is still going to ruin so many players' games. It's going to stop them from going off and winning. And hey, even if you don't get the most out of that, you still have a 13/13 flying trample with protection from instants. So have fun with that. Number 9, we have Kryptolethwright from Shadows Over Innistrad. It's been some time since this was considered just a bulk rare. Now worth around $10, you have an enchantment here that makes it so each creature you control taps for 1 mana of any color, basically turning all of your creatures into birds of paradise. That's awesome. Mana production ramp is never a bad thing, and while Kryptolethwright isn't the guaranteed form of ramp that a lot of other cards are, when it's working, it is going to be pretty powerful. Number 8, we have the last angel here, Avacyn Angel of Hope. This one, I think, is the strongest because it protects your board. Makes all of your permanents indestructible, so there really isn't any reason to hold back. You have a flying vigilance 8/8 that also is indestructible, in addition to everything else you have that can attack. So you can block all day, you can attack all day, almost consequence-free. Avacyn, in my opinion, is the strongest angel to come out of the Avacyn Restored set, and one of the best white cards in the Commander format, period. Number 7, we have Parallel Lives. This was Anointed Procession before Anointed Procession, and it still hasn't been reprinted. But for every reason why Anointed Procession is powerful, here you go, you get another one. Double your tokens, doesn't really matter what kind of token. It could be a treasure token, it could be a clue token, not just your creature tokens. Always been viewed as 1/2 of a doubling season, but if your deck is only benefiting off of that 1/2, Parallel Lives is definitely preferable. In number 6, we have Crater Hoof Behemoth. One of the best ways, one of the quickest ways to win in green. I think it should be no secret by now, these sets are absolutely loaded with Commander staples. And while Crater Hoof isn't an absolute Commander staple, if your deck can make the numbers, if your deck can hold the board presence, Crater Hoof is almost always a guaranteed win. You're giving all your creatures +X/+X and trample. Oh, and it gets to attack too. Definitely worth the 8 mana. When you look at a lot of cards and wonder why they're so expensive, just know you're getting your value's worth with Crater Hoof Behemoth and then some. This is a card that could easily be 10 mana and still worth it. Number 5, we have Cavern of Souls. So far I've talked about mostly offensive cards. Cavern of Souls is the one defensive card from these sets that will absolutely stop your opponents from counterspelling. It is meant for tribal decks, it's meant to benefit those decks the most, since it's more likely for you to have the most creatures that share a creature type in those decks, but it's not mandatory. You could just use this to protect your commander. If your commander is important for your strategy, spend the mana on it so that your opponents can't counter it. Very competitive playing something like this, because the most competitive decks are usually prepared to counter whatever creature you want to cast. And then number 4, we have Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage isn't quite the card that it used to be. I think if you asked anyone 6 or 7 years ago, they would probably tell you this is the most powerful card from the Innistrad sets. However, it's something you can still flash into play to flash back an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Get a second use out of something just for paying this 2 mana, and in blue where you don't always have something like this that's this cheap and abusable at the same time. But I think over time it will be proven that Snapcaster Mage is going to age pretty well. And then number 3, we have Anguished Unmaking, the best targeting removal spell in these sets by a mile. Exile target non-land permanent, you lose 3 life. You get to deal with any non-land permanent, you get to exile it for only 3 mana instant speed. That's really what this is about in Commander. the life loss here is almost always negligible. You get rid of the biggest threat, Sans lands of course, but you get to deal with something that's a real pain like Avacyn Angel of Hope, which I think there might be a little bit of flavor here as to why you're able to deal with that kind of problem, just looking at the artwork and all. But just a powerful card without a doubt. If I were making a top 10 on just Shadows over Innistrad, this would most certainly be the number 1 choice. But number 2 we have Blasphemous Act. I had this at number 1 back when I did a top 10 for the original Innistrad, and I stand by that 100%. I think in terms of value, whenever you pay less to do something that's incredible, that card deserves to be towards the top of any list. And with Blasphemous Act, most of the time, if not always, you're just paying 1 red mana to deal 13 damage to each creature. Yes, it doesn't deal with indestructibles like Avacyn, but that's 1 red mana to deal with just about everything. And in Commander, where you probably have 3 opponents, including yourself, and your creatures, this is pretty much a lock at 1 red mana. Not only is Blasphemous Act one of the best cards from the Innistrad sets, it's one of the best cards for Commander, period. And then we move on to number 1, the number 1 card that I think ever came out of one of these Innistrad sets, Blood Artist. There's an honorable mention to Falconwrath Noble, but cost is really relevant here, and Blood Artist will likely win out between the two every time. Whenever it or another creature dies, doesn't matter if it's yours or your opponent's, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is abusable in combos to win, this is abusable with board wipes, this is abusable for Vampire Tribal, this is abusable for a lot of good Aristocrat decks. It's a staple and easily one of the most played cards from these sets. That's why when you look at the top 3 cards of this list, all staples, I think Blood Artist is the deadliest. So let me know what you think about the top 20 cards from the Innistrad sets. Again, that is Innistrad, Dark Ascension, Avacyn Restored, Shadows over Innistrad, and Eldritch Moon. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.